Yes, in the diocesan, but you were in the middle of rehearsal, so
Woo!
Kia ora koutou. Well, I didn't make it to any of the rehearsals, and I'm still processing that beautiful work. Congratulations. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And I have to say, I'm not at my best when I'm processing things. And you guys, your tails are up. You've been performing, and but anyway, let's try and see what we can do in the next 15 to 20 minutes. Now, my understanding is that there is going to be an opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, for you to ask questions. You may wish to start thinking about those, but I'm going to kick off. I guess my first question is, why collaborate between text and music when those two things can tear each other apart in a marriage? and when also potentially it can be a very productive relationship. I guess looking at the performance, there are moments in the text that I would imagine Kenneth, you had taken and repeated the words in order to allow the music to set up and create the tensions that you were looking for and resolve them. And so the text is in a way being dragged through one particular relationship. On the other hand, I suppose at times the orchestration is such that it's perhaps not intended that we hear the text, and we've got surtitles so that those come across. So I suppose, what is it, given some of those tensions in that relationship, what is it that drives you to collaborate and use both?
I like a challenge. I've never written one before. I've written a couple of song cycles, but that's about it, really. So the stimulus for the piece had been that I always wanted to write something, or for a number of years now, I wanted to write something of an existential nature, which would hopefully make an audience respond as to what resonated with them in their spirituality or in their journey in life. And all I needed was a narrative. And this man provided me the perfect narrative to do that.
I wanted to get onto the spiritual in a minute, because that's clearly resonates through the whole piece. But I noticed even in the preface in the program, you spoke about the word God. Whitty in his text chooses to use the word God, which is and him actually, which carries all sorts of resonance. And in your program note, you talk a little bit about that, about your perception being more general. Does that disturb you at all, or is it something you take it and you go, right, I enjoy the tension that it sets up?
I don't care what you call it. It's got many names, as we know, as I mentioned, and no, it's what resonates with you, which is important, and that's why I wrote the piece, to hopefully invite people to investigate their own feeling as to what resonated with them.
And Whitty, for you, just on the same theme, what do you feel that the music brings to the choice of words that you?
Well, a lot of you will know that Richard Strauss asked this question: "Poi le parole, poi la musica," which is more important, the music or the text? Yeah. Well, of course, I will say the text, but this is the first time that I've actually seen the piece, and to be able to hear Jared bring a character to life means that the words are part of a whole complex of participation. And to hear the orchestra, thank you very much. The orchestra was absolutely part of the whole strength of the piece, and another voice in the piece. So for me, it really is this wonderful, wonderful melding of music, of words, of orchestra, of characterization. How this boy here managed to keep it together for the entire performance, I have no idea. And of course, with Kenneth's music, I loved the third interlude, Kenneth.
Yeah, it's
I hope
wonderful.
I like more than that.
It's wonderful when the music takes over from the text, and our minds can go to a different place because we're not attending consciously in the same way as we are to when there is
Yes,
text.
and so I'm just going to add another thing. I think that when I was watching it, I could see just how we would do it again. You know, with Karl Morn's beautiful work, changing the seasons for us from summer through autumn to winter to spring, and butterflies, and the whole imagery on stage would just be perfect. So I'm looking forward to that.
Was that part of your thinking, leading into it?
It was, yeah.
Mm. And that's a different element again, I guess, in terms of. I want to switch over to the other side, gentlemen. Well, it'll be to both of you. I'm interested in a new work and what layers of responsibility that imposes on you as interpreters, and to what extent you feel the need to be in touch with the people on my right, and to what extent you feel the need to drive it.
Well, I'm very lucky because I have the boss here with me. So I spend so much of my time not being able to talk to composers. So when I do have a chance to talk to a living one, I take every single opportunity that I can get. So I was busy turning around the whole time. Ken's going, oh God, he's got another question. So I feel a real sense of responsibility, having written a couple of dots myself as a composer, to really do my absolute best for Ken and the music. And this is the best gig I could ever imagine doing, actually, because it's new, it's New Zealand, it's beautiful poetry, and I think it's a fantastic piece. So I've had a ball, even though I was concentrating fairly hard, but I was having a great time. So it's a real pleasure to work with it, and I've exchanged emails, of course, with Ken. I've actually just met Whitty for the first time tonight on stage. So, but Ken and I have been back and forward for many weeks, looking at the score, and I'm always asking questions, and Ken has all the answers, thankfully.
I'm going to come on to that. Jared, do you have an answer to that question?
Well, I think for probably obvious reasons, I felt a huge amount of responsibility coming into things late and knowing how important this was for Ken and Whitty, and just to want to really serve that as best I could. But at the same time, I'm never going to be a performer who, on the night, sticks his head down all the time and follows every dot. At some stage, I suppose I was thinking about this in terms of an analogy, and it's like I was given a really nice car to drive for the evening, a beautiful car. And of course you want to take care of a beautiful car, but also cars are made for driving. So once the keys were mine, then I was going to do my best to try and create something as well, but a huge responsibility at the same time to really try and serve this beautiful piece.
And thank you. That's a really beautiful answer. It's as an opera director, I often dream of having Verdi, Mozart, and various others sitting next to me, in the hope that I can get away with much more than I'm usually allowed to get away with. But I have a question for you, Kenneth, in particular, and Whitty to some extent. As works age and they're interpreted again by different generations, hopefully, and presumably that's a great thing. You don't want a piece like this to end up in a drawer. You want future performances. And imagine you're no longer with us. What would you be thinking if a group of artists were interpreting this and wanting to make changes, and they were saying, well, you know, times have moved on, this could be a little faster, our attention span is less, or this could be slower because we want to linger here, and they're making those sorts of decisions that are probably departing from your original intentions. How if you can future yourself, how would you feel about that?
I think that's essential, actually. I think you give a piece to 5 conductors, they're going to have a different way of approaching it, and they're going to find things. I mean, I've had experiences over many years where conductors and chamber ensembles have come along and played works in a manner perhaps different to mine in certain areas, and you realise that they're actually adding something rather than taking something away. You would hope if future generations approach the work with the attitude that Tequin and Jared have had, that they would be trying to have some integrity about it, and that's all you expect from those who interpret your own music. And so they're going to find things in it that I hadn't conceived. That's the nature of collaboration. That's how it works. That's why music works so well.
Well, I just feel so thrilled that the orchestra was able to rehearse this and that boy over there would want to sing it for one performance. It is simply astounding that an orchestra, isn't it, Thomas, would learn a major work like this and put it on in the expectation that it will be part of the tradition, a New Zealand tradition of music. And I had to laugh because, in the fourth act, when you have the wonderful ecclesiastical going on, I thought to myself, yes, well, this is Kenneth tying it to the English tradition of music. And then I could also hear some aspects of Ravel and of impressionistic music there. So I think that you've done a wonderful job tying this piece to a particular whakapapa that takes it back to the European tradition.
Thank you. I'm conscious that time is moving on, and there may be people who wish to ask one or other members of the panel a question.
Thank you very much. Witty, what was the impetus for the story?
Well, Ken was the impetus for the story. He actually did want something that had to do with existence, and the whole idea of travelling through a garden over summer, autumn, winter, spring gave us both an opportunity to think this man into existence and to think the colours of change and sadness and getting over grief within that garden metaphor. So the impetus for it was actually through the conversations that Ken and I had about death and about transfiguration. And so that got me thinking about Richard Strauss and Berlioz in particular. So we both were in conversation. So don't blame it on me. Well, I have done an opera with John Rimmer called Galileo, and so that whole business of, that Galileo has in terms of scientific discussion was part of what Ken and I talked about as well. So it was really something that we came to in terms of that collaboration. And yes, he's a very romantic person. And so we did want to talk about children, we did want to think about wives and partners, and we did want to have that whole relationship explored between science and the humanities in terms of the kind of rich stuff that happens and the kinds of angular material. And I found that so exciting in your music. So exciting.
Music evokes, words evoke. We've mentioned the work of Carl Norm. Has the images and the pictures and the textures of that influenced you as well? So is there another dimension here that sits behind what you've done that we can't necessarily see?
Carl's work I love. Witty actually introduced me to more of it than I'd seen previously. So yeah, there was an element of that. It's kind of a fit in that it wasn't an overall influence with regards to the piece, but there is a kind of a symmetry going on in that if you look at Carl's work, there's a lushness to it, and there's a warmth and a colour and a brightness to it, which relates to the way I like to write in many ways. And you probably notice some of the textures in summer and spring in particular have a certain lush quality to them and a brightness and a light to them, and that's very much came from observing quite a lot of Carl's work. So yes, it did have an influence in that respect.
So you covered quite a lot of ground going from summer through the seasons and also like into grief, following grief, and yet it didn't feel jarring to go through that in a short amount of time. Was it a challenge to make such, to move through so much ground in a short period of time? And how did you approach the pacing of the piece?
Do you want me to answer that or Whitty?
Probably you first.
Okay.
Whitty, if he has something to say as well.
It's interesting, as a composer, I find that the thing that I concentrate on most as a composer is transitions, going from one section to another or from one mood to another, and that's what I put my work into most of all, so that you can have a seamless quality to it. And so, yes, it is difficult. It's not difficult, it just means you spend a lot of time doing it. And I hope that was successful tonight. It felt like it flowed quite nicely from one to the other, and yet there are different moods within each season. So does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
So for me, a lot of it was in the pauses, and seeing the orchestra and hearing the orchestra turning itself into summer and turning itself into spring and turning itself into autumn. They were very important, and also Jared thinking through the piece. For instance, I keep on thinking, would I like to change the ending? And maybe, because this is our opportunity, isn't it, all of us, to think about where the piece might go, because this is the first time I've ever heard it, and this is the first time you've ever heard it on stage. And so I think another team needs to, including you and I, needs to look at it and think, okay, so, for instance, I think that the yachting scene with the storm happens should be bigger. It should be bigger, and I'd really like to see it being bigger in the orchestra. But that's something that we could talk about later. They'll probably kill me now.
All right. Eve.
Yeah, congratulations all. I thought it was a masterly work. I think I'm not alone in saying that it got better as it went along, both within the narrative and musically speaking, Ken. I think that I'd like you to talk a little bit about the orchestration, because I thought some of the more moving and beautiful layers of the story were revealed, particularly in that stonking brass chorale. That was tear-jerking. That was harrowing stuff. Congratulations. Can you talk a bit about how you dealt with the orchestra?
Oh, you know me, Eve. That's my thing. That's what I like to do, is orchestrate. I'm an orchestration geek. So for me, having written the piece, it took me 6 months to orchestrate it. I spent a long time orchestrating it. I sort of spent 18 months sketching it out and then 6 months orchestrating it basically every day. So it's something that I take great care of, and it's a science for me, and I don't use software. I just use this catalogue of sounds I seem to have in my head and just do it very, very carefully. But also with regards, I found myself, because each of the characters has their own motif, as you may or may not have picked up on, and it was how to approach, how to instrumentate those particular motifs. How was I going to get the wife's motive to sound? And it goes through various, from the beginning of the opera itself through to when she's drowned, it takes on various guises, and I had to figure out how I was going to disguise those. Well, not disguise those, but represent those. And the same with the two boys. They have very delicate, very sort of emotional little motifs, and combining those in certain ways was always a thing. So you just hear them from time to time, and you don't even notice they're there. So I was taking care to represent the symbolic nature of the motifs as best as I could, so that they were there but not getting in the way of what Jared had to attend to. I'm not quite sure if that answers your question, but for me, if you don't get the orchestration right, you've got to. Yeah. It's not going to happen.
And the contrabassoon solo, Ken, because
you like that
just sounded ridiculous. Get rid of it.
Well, that's the little folk tune, so it seemed quite grim at that stage. So I thought contrabassoon's got to have a solo there.
So I said to everybody backstage, I don't know what kind of work this is, but we have been in a very unique position of seeing the orchestra on stage, Jared on stage, Whereas if it was an opera, as we say it is, the orchestra would be down there and the focus would be on Jared as the performer, the sole performer. And I'm hoping, Ken, that we will be able to give Jared an opportunity to really grab it and do with it what opera does, which is a dramatic production as well as an orchestral, wonderful piece.
Let's take it to the ATS Centre.
Thanks. Yeah.
I would like to let you all know that the first time the orchestra played this piece was yesterday morning. So you have nothing, it's nothing to do with me, but of course I'm biased, but you have a gem here in the city. So if you don't already subscribe to, this is an advert now, subscribe to the APO, please hurry up. They are world class. So quite simply, when I came, I'd wondered whether we had enough time, and it was just, they were amazing. So next time you see them, please yell and scream and stomp your feet. And I would also like to just say there was one other person that helped us put this all together, and that's Frances Moore from the APO. She's sitting over there. So Frances was a dramaturgical expert and really helped with characterization and sort of bouncing ideas off Ken while we were doing the walking left and right and acting thing. So thank you very much, Frances, for your work with us.
We're nearing the limit of our time, I think. One thing I would say in response to one or two of the comments, or several things actually. One is that in defense of new works, it is wonderful to hear them once, but it's even better to hear them again and again. If the initial judgment of most critics on the first night of most classical works, certainly opera, dictated their future, then there'd be very little around. It's taken a lot of subsequent generations to really hear inside works, and especially works like this that have layers of depth to them. Just to finish off, perhaps I have one question. There are so many themes in this piece that we could go on for a very long time, but I'd like to ask each member up here on stage, where do you find hope? Well, I'm going to start with Whitty. Actually, Kenneth.
I find it from within.
My mother's maiden name is Hope, so I have it already in the family, so I'm all good.
My first thought was I find it about 12 bars before the end, but I think within as well.
Well, to answer your question, it's an open question that we are asking the audience. And that is, your response to that will be the reason why you will embrace it in the end, I think, because it asks questions that we hope that you will find your own answers to.
Correct. Thank you, Whitty.
Great, thank you once again. Well done. Thank you.